Yo, what's up, my people? I'm here today with some more crazy movie English stuff that's gonna blow your freaking mind. And guess what? Guess who we're talking about? That's right, Jesus. Jesus, and even more Jesus. Oh my gosh. However, I ain't gonna go completely religious on you because I'm not trying to be a priest or anything. I'm just trying to talk about movies and all that good stuff. Anyways, we're gonna talk about the movie. Drum roll, please. The Passion. You know, the one with Mel Gibson. Oh, yeah. But he's just the director, though, so don't get your hopes up so fast. First off, if you've never heard of Jesus, you've probably been living under a rock for the past 2,000 years. Jesus, along with the Father and the Holy Spirit, basically make up the means for following the Catholic Church. The movie is about the Passion of Jesus, more specifically, his suffering and death during the last 12 hours of his life. Even though we were talking about Jesus, the real reason this movie was made was to reflect on the social political anxiety of terrorism. Yep, you heard me, terrorism. But we will get more into that later. In this video, we will look at the Passion of Christ through the eyes of a 9/11 victim to discover why the abandonment of faith is not the solution to coping with publicized or unpublicized tragedies. If Jesus doesn't ring a bell by now, here's a short summary. Jesus is praying in the Garden of Olives after he ate his final meal. And Judas Iscariot, you know, the one apostle who betrayed Jesus, was like, oh, hell no. And he managed to get Jesus arrested and taken back to Jerusalem. At the time, Jesus was performing miracles and proclaiming to be the Son of God, in which he was. He was God in flesh, but besides the apostles, no one believed in him. Jesus was brought back to Jerusalem, where he was put on trial and was sentenced to death for blasphemy by big bosses Pontius Pilate and Herod. To make himself not feel as bad, Pilate decided to give the nearby crowd a choice. They gave the option to release Jesus or Barabbas, who was a prisoner. Barabbas was a psycho and killed a ton of people, but for some crazy reason, the crowd chanted and screamed for Barabbas to be set free. Starting now, viewer discretion is advised. You're about to see some Mel Gibson gore. Jesus is pounded with hammers and these massive chains with all this creepy stuff. He's bleeding all over and is being humiliated like an absolute animal. To top things off, he's given a crown of thorns and is mocked by the crowds as they scream, King of the Jews. My man just got destroyed by these soldiers and began to make him carry a cross up a mountain called Golgotha. It's also called Land of the Skull. This is some creepy stuff. At the top of Golgotha, he's crucified, where he's hung by his hands and feet to die. As he is approaching his death, he yells his famous last words,
They're dead.
At the moment of his death, the weather turns dark and nature overturns itself. And there's the Passion in a nutshell. This could be another typical religious movie with a little bit more gore, but the real reason this movie was made was because of 9/11 and terrorism to help regain lost faith. Yes, 9/11. You're probably thinking I'm crazy, but this early 2004 film's goal was to help people regain their faith after the horrible terrorist attacks of 9/11. Before, everyone had a life of safety with little worry, but when the attacks happened, everyone became vulnerable and afraid. So these afraid people would not even trust their own religion. Why would a God make such a terrible thing happen was the main question being asked. In a New York survey with the Very Well Mind, lots of people concluded that they began to question their faith deeply, so deeply. So many did not reach out for help and try to answer these near impossible questions on their own. Since they never found the answers they wanted to these questions, they just abandoned the faith completely. In response to this problem, the Passion was created. Shout out Mel Gibson! And countless scenes correspond with the pondering effects of 9/11. In one of the opening scenes, Peter, who denied Jesus 3 times, is shown running away from the public and Jesus himself. He then curls up into a ball and contemplates what he did to Jesus. Soon after, 2 small boys, approaching him, asked if he needed help, but Peter screamed and yelled at them, saying, "Get away from me!" A grown man yelling at 2 small children for helping him seems very harsh. This represents how men after 9/11 did not trust others and did not support each other when their loved ones passed away. This powerful scene shows how people run away from their problems instead of confronting them. After the 2 boys are rejected, the 2 boys appear to be mentally taken over by the devil. Their face becomes distorted and they start attacking and biting Peter. Peter now is seeing the devil face to face through these 2 children. This represents how when 9/11 victims did not want to express themselves, they were often attacked by their own emotions. It was only the thought of evil holding them back. The boys themselves represents the depressing emotions the victim felt. Another scene that reflects 9/11 is that of when Jesus is scourged at the pillar. We already looked at this a little bit before, but Jesus, an innocent man, is beaten for no reason at all. The main point to take away from this is that he is 100% innocent. Just like 9/11, the victims who were dead and alive were completely innocent at the time. There was no reason they had to go through the suffering they did. The terrorists of 9/11 wanted to have power and show their power to the world. Pilate and Herod wanted to have full power and wanted no contradictions, the contradiction being Jesus. So, to show their power, they humiliated Jesus by having him scourged and eventually crucified. Overall, the purpose of comforting the victims of 9/11 was a huge success. The Passion is one of the most influential movies for the faith of all time. At first glance, a bloody, gory version of Jesus would not seem to be the most attractive. However, the gore is what binded the faith tighter together. The vivid imagery makes the audience feel like, wow, Jesus really did die for me. One could even say that the viewer feels a sense of guilt, and the thing the watchers would have to give back would be restoring their faith in Jesus. For Catholics, this movie was no doubt a huge. So what's the big deal? Was there any point to this video at all? And the answer is yes. What we have learned through the Passion is that faith never dies. As cheesy as it sounds, it is true. Movies are not just a form of entertainment. They are supposed to personally affect you for the better. Many movies can lead you astray from reality with fake perceptions of the world, but this specific movie saved many people. For Catholics, this was the first real sight of light at the end of a dark tunnel. Before the release of the movie, the Catholics who stayed Catholic just stayed as a routine. The release of this movie helped shape many people's relationship with God. This point has never really been publicly addressed. So now you know. Abandoning faith after a world tragedy does not solve the problem. The only solution is time. It takes lots of patience, but once you can understand the full picture, everything comes together and it will make sense. And even if the problem is never answered specifically, there is always hope. Hope, something that never dies.